Next topic, switch. What is a switch? Switch is nothing but it is a statement is used to take multiple selections. Means suppose in your Java program if you want to make multiple comparisons, we can use a switch statement. Instead of using switch, we can also use if else or else if ladders, but that else if ladders makes your code what more clumsy. Means it will increase the length of the code and the readability of the code will be goes down. To improve the code readability, we need to use a switch statement instead of using else if ladders. We can use this switch statement. What's the second point? So we can use a switch statement as a substitute for long if else ladders, right? Next, the use of switch statement makes our code more readable, as I said. So if you are using if else statement, so your code readability goes down. To improve code readability, we must use switch statements so that it will improve the code readability. Next, this is the syntax. So first we need to write a switch, and it is a method. Inside a method we need to pass an argument. This argument may be variable or it's a expression. This argument may be variable or it's an expression. And here we need to write cases. How many cases you want, that many cases you can take, no problem. And at least you need to take one default value. Default also optional, you can take or you can also not take. Okay, without case and default also it will work. Empty switch is possible, without case and default is possible. So we have some rules to construct switch statements, so we will see one by one. Coming to the first rule, the value for a case must be a constant or a literal. Variables are not allowed. Means suppose take an example. I will explain with an example. So suppose here I am taking some int a equals to some 10 or int b equals to some 100 and c equals to some 1000. Okay, so suppose if I am using switch a, next case a, and system.out.println just 10 and break. Assume, so this is my program. Suppose here I am passing b, and here I am passing c. So this is not allowed. Okay, this is not allowed in Java. Okay, let it. So this is not allowed in Java. Reason, as per the rule, so this should not be a variable. Case label should not be a variable. Case label should not be a variable. It must be a constant. It must be a constant or a literal, but it should not be or even expression also it is accept, but variable is not accepted here. Okay, suppose if you want to make it acceptable, so you need to write final so that it will work. It will print 10, but if you remove this final, means here this variable is not allowed here. Okay, so that is the first rule, right? So coming to second rule, curly braces are mandatory. Curly braces are mandatory. If not, it will generate a compilation error. Curly braces are not, sorry, curly braces are mandatory. If not, it will generate a compilation error. If you take if else, so curly braces are optional. If you take if else, curly braces are optional. If you are not using curly braces, the scope of if else is only one statement. But in switch curly braces are mandatory. If you are not using curly braces, simply it will generate a compile time error. Suppose if I take an example, same, I will explain the programmatically. So suppose, yes, mandatory here, braces is a mandatory. Now case and default is always optional. Okay, if you are run this program, it will work. Braces are what? Mandatory, and case and default is optional. Okay, even if you are not writing anything also, it will work. But if you are not writing what braces, it will generate compile time error. Now see here, expected. Okay, so brace is expected here. So suppose if you take if else, so suppose if a less than b, here I am taking, and system.out.println, so here a is small. So I have a statement like this, assume, so a is smaller than b, a is smaller than b, else, so b is smaller than a, b is smaller than a. Suppose if you run this program, it will work. The reason, if you even if you are not, a is smaller than b, why? Because it is a 10 and it's a 100, so obviously it will execute this one, right? So even without braces also it will work. The scope, if you are not using braces, the scope of this statement is at least only one statement, one single line statement, right? So but this rule is not applicable in switch. This rule is not applicable in switch. Okay, next, coming to next one. Inside switch, it is possible to declare any number of cases, but only one default is allowed. You can take any number of cases, but only one default is allowed, and you can write that default anywhere. Okay, you can write that default anywhere. Suppose I have a statement, so earlier statement I will take. Okay, assume, so suppose here I'm taking the final. So here my intention is how many defaults it is possible within the switch. So suppose if you take one more default, it will not allow. Okay, so only you have to take one default. So this leads what? Error. This leads a compile time error. Duplicate default label, right? So when you compile this one, it will generate the compile time error, that is a duplicate default label. So only one default is allowed in Java program. Okay, so that is one rule. You can take any cases, there is no restriction, but you need to take only one default, and that default also optional, and case and default also optional, right? So already discussed. Now coming to next one, break statement is optional and is used to terminate the statements. Okay, break statement is optional and it is used to terminate the statements. Suppose I have a statements like, so a equals to 10, b equals to 20,000. So assume, so this is my example. So here I am using only one break. So okay, first I will explain with the break. So what it will happen means, so it will terminate the statements, right? So just run your program. Now it will print only this one. Now it will print only this one. Observe here, it will print only 10. Okay, now I want to print. Okay, so now I am removing break here and break here. Okay, so okay, here also I am deleting this one. Here also I am deleting this one. So now run your application. So up to break it will print the statements. See here, so up to here, so where is my break? So this is the break statement. So up to here it will print what? Statements. Means this leads what? Fall through in switch statement. This is called fall through in switch statement. Okay, if you are not using any break, so it will leads fall through in switch statements. Next point, in switch allowed argument types are byte, short, int, char and string. By mistake, if you are using any other data types, it leads compile time error. So float double long is not allowed for switch argument because these are having more number of possibilities. Means, so why float double and long are not allowed means, between any two floating values infinite values will be existed. Suppose if I take an example like 10.202 10.30, so here we will have what infinite values like 10.20 10.201 10.202, like, so we will have what infinite values. So infinite comparisons are not possible and this leads this leads what? System performance, low system performance. Means, suppose if you take long also almost it's a infinity, means this much range, this many comparisons, and this many, if you perform this many comparisons, so your performance, your system performance will be goes down. So this float double long are not allowed in switch, and even boolean will have what? Only two comparisons. So if else is enough. So instead of using switch you can use if else. So that is the reason. So boolean is also not allowed in switch. Here I have a program, I have a sample program. So byte base equals to 126 and here I have one switch statement and cases are like 125, 126, 127 and 128, and here I am printing something. So value is 125 like this. So when you run this program, so what will happen we will see now. So just cmd, just to type java c space demo.java. Now see here, incompatible types, possible loss of conversion into 2 byte means, so case 128 means, so while you are writing the cases, that cases must be within the range. While you are writing the cases, the cases must be within the range. Suppose where it is, so here in 126, so byte b is equals to 126, it is a fine, it is within the range. But all these cases are what? 125, 126, okay, 127 is okay, but 128 is not allowed. The reason, so byte range is minus 128 to plus 127, but this case is 128. So this comparison is not possible. So this leads what? Compile time error. This leads compile time error. So while you are writing the cases, all the cases must be within the range.